welcome Diana Kathryn Penn. Diana is going to be joining us for the Holiday Book Festival in Milford, Michigan on November 30th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate you asking me to step into the mayhem.
It is going to be quite the mayhem because you're going to be joined with 31 other authors.
And I'm really excited about that because as an author, you don't always get to meet the people who write the stories. And that's one of the reasons I love doing your events in particular, is because I get to mingle and chat and go home with brand new books every single time. So I appreciate that you let me come play in your sandbox.
And it will be quite the sandbox with 32. And honestly, I know less than 10 of them
I'm having the same
beforehand.
problem, which is a good problem to have.
I know. I'm very excited to see that
I-
and see
I've
who
been
else.
looking at new bookshelves to buy just because.
And the new wagon to pull.
Well, yeah,
It'll be the book wagon.
yeah.
Table wagon, book wagon.
Exactly.
All right. So, at this wonderful sandbox of mayhem, you're going to have 10 books in
Well,
ish.
if Zeus smiles upon me, I will have 13.
Oh,
I'm working toward 11. My paranormal is in the final stages of edit right now, and I'm hoping that that's going to be out in October. That's the big push, the big goal. And then
okay.
I have two other books, a Western and a crime suspense novella, that I'm
Oh, wow.
hoping both of those are going to be ready by November as well. But we'll see how much writing I get done between now and then. November being the big NaNoWriMo push, I might
Mm-hmm.
be able to get everything tied up. I'm a NaNoWriMo rebel, so and this year I have like 6 projects I need to finish. So instead of starting a new project, my goal this year is to complete things.
Oh, completing projects.
Hmm.
So, what genres do we have to look forward to that you will have on hand?
Okay, so I will have romance, I will have satire, I will have 2 collections of short stories that I wrote with Drake, my duck muse. That's a whole other long story. A collection of poetry. I have a children's middle grade fantasy novel. I have a children's picture book, and that one, the second in that series, might be out in November too,
Oh,
depending on if the art is ready. We're getting closer. Art is one of those things you never want to rush,
oh,
but we are getting closer, and every day I get to see new pieces of art. So hopefully that one will be ready too.
wow. You could have like a whole
I
half
could
a
have 4
table.
new ones
Ooh.
if I really, like I say, if Zeus smiles this time. Yeah. So then I also wrote a language arts creative writing curriculum and a workbook, and that
Mhm.
workbook will be there on the table as well. And then I also have um, uh, language arts writing crafting workbooks that are out for adults. I have 2 of those.
Hmm.
So several genres, several different books, definitely 10 books on the table.
Wow.
Depending on how much sleep I don't get between now and then, maybe 14. We'll see.
And now you also have anthologies that I
Indeed.
know that you have had a hand in. Are you going to have those on your table?
I will have some on my table, and I know that other authors who are attending will also have them. Right now, we have 7 anthologies out. These are community service projects where several authors from various walks of life and genres contribute. They respond to a prompt or a specific genre call or a theme call, and then I take all of the submissions and edit them together, and we produce an anthology collection. And proceeds go to support the Haley Sue Foundation. So it's our way of giving back to community and giving writers an opportunity to maybe publish for the first time, or for established authors to rebuild or additionally build, I should say, their writing platform, so they have more material out in the world. I will have 3 of our anthologies on my table in November, and I know another author, Andrew Allen Smith, will also have at least 3, sometimes 4, depending on where his inventory sits at the particular time. So so there's an opportunity, and these are short stories. In one case, it's a collaborative novel where 28 people got together and wrote a novel, and that was an adventure. That was an editorial adventure.
Yeah.
And then and so the rest are collections of short stories and or poetry. As I say, they collect on a theme or specific prompts.
Oh, wow. So
So,
you
and then all the proceeds that we generate from those book sales go to support charity, and I think that's a really important thing. So we try to produce 3 books a year for charity.
Wow. So you're collecting one right now that is like a fantasy
Mm.
type
We
genre?
we just finished collecting our Flights of Fantasy, which is a
Okay.
collection of short stories and poetry for children.
Okay.
And so that book is brand new, just released last month. So that's out in
Okay.
the world right now. I will have that on the table. And then right now we have an open call until the end of October. And this is a call for short stories and poetry in speculative fiction, fantasy, either high fantasy, epic fantasy, low fantasy, or science fiction. So
Ooh.
if you write in any of those 3 major genres, which of course have several subgenres underneath those, so speculative
Mhm.
fiction, science fiction, fantasy, you can contribute. And we don't have specific requirements other than those 3 major genres, and between 200 words and 20,000 words. So we're really giving people an opportunity to stretch their craft a little bit, maybe write
Mhm.
in an area that they're not familiar with, but they've always wanted to dip their flippers in that pond, paddle around a little bit, see what it's like. Um, and that book is also usually we do family friendly books, but the
Mhm.
book that we have, it's the book is titled Visions. That's the new
Mhm.
book that we have a call for. And Visions is not, it does not have a family friendly requirement. So
Okay.
each story inside the cover will have a rating, just like movie ratings, to let you know how family friendly or not
Not.
family friendly it might be. But that when we give authors a wider berth to create that way, we get
Mhm.
a lot of versatility and a lot of um, we cast a wider net, right?
Yeah.
And so we get a lot more diversity, and really the creativity just goes off the chart when we say, okay, write what you like, and we'll just gonna give everybody list, reader. We have little reader advisories for each story,
Mhm.
just to give people advance warning if there might be something that may be triggering to them. We did one collection called The Drifter and Other Unusual Tales, and we got so many really great horror and thriller pieces that I
Ooh.
actually put the trigger warning on the front cover,
Oh, wow.
because this was it turned out to be a really creepy collection of really cool stuff. It's really cool stuff, but not for children. So
Well, you just
so
had the
we
one for children.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. We do books that are specifically family friendly, and
Mhm.
then I try to vary it and give other authors an opportunity who maybe write more edgier things to have that opportunity to publish more. So
Neat. Now, these anthologies, you are publishing and editing because you don't only write, but you also publish and edit.
I do. So as you can see up here, my day job, there it goes. It's weird doing that backward.
Right?
So my day job is I'm a professional book editor, book formatter, and publisher, and Pages Promotions is the company, and I help authors fine tune their work. I help them format it for print and ebook. I develop websites for authors, so I do all those extended author career type service things. And then in my private life, well, okay, not really private life, um,
Yeah.
I'm an author of multiple genres, and then I also produce a podcast called Indie Reads Aloud, where I invite authors to come on my program and read from their work so that they can maybe find new readers. My world revolves around the written word. That's where I swim best. It's where I'm happiest, and I'm really really fortunate that people pay me to read their books and help them make them better. I mean, I can't imagine a better thing in the world than that. So I tell everybody on the podcast I'm still a recovering 6-year old. I just like
Hmm.
it when people tell me stories. Um, so yeah, I'm very fortunate that I get to help authors hone their craft and maybe you help them produce something that might be a little stronger than when they started.
Which means this is a little odd for you to be the one having questions asked because normally you're on the other end of that
Oh,
asking.
so odd. Oh, so odd. Can't even begin to tell you. I am not the person who usually speaks about my own work. I tell everybody I'm a great spotlight operator.
Mm-hmm.
I did professional theater for 15 years. I was a lighting designer and set designer, and I'm a great spotlight operator. I am amazing putting spotlights on other people. Put me on stage, give me 2 lines of dialogue, and I'll mess them up every time. So, and I've actually done that, messed them up. 2 lines of dialogue, and I messed them both up. So,
So
I prefer to just push everybody else out into the footlights, and I'll stand dressed in black and give you guys the opportunity.
so will you be reading at the Holiday Book Festival?
If you force me, I will. Yeah.
Well, I don't force anybody to
Yeah.
do anything.
Well, so the I actually I love reading aloud.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I raised a son. I worked in daycare in a former life. I love reading aloud,
Mm-hmm.
and reading my work aloud gives me the opportunity to let people kind of eavesdrop inside my brain a little bit, or depending on if it's my work or Drake's work, sometimes you're inside
Right.
a duck's head. But it gives you the opportunity. That's why I love it when people read out loud to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I crafted my podcast the way I did, because there's something really special about the perspective an author lends to their own work. You, especially in fantasy, I'm editing a dragon book right now. I can't
Ooh.
wait to have this author on my podcast, because then I'll learn how to pronounce all the names of the dragons that I just keep pronouncing my way in my head. I'll learn the way that they're actually supposed to be pronounced. Um, so yeah, I enjoy reading aloud. Um, I'd rather do it in the
So a
dark, but
definite, so a definite maybe.
yeah, I mean, if you need filler time, I'll be happy to read. I have enough material. I'll be happy to read.
Well, yeah, you have plenty of books to choose from.
Yeah, my problem is, what do I read?
Yeah. So one that you will have there is in the book cover contest, Trista
Mm-hmm.
Fate,
Mm-hmm.
and you have that book cover so we can
I
see it.
do, yeah. So
Ooh,
here it
Trista
is.
Fate, and that is
So
your romance novel.
indeed, yeah, this is a romance novel. It's a little different though. So A Tryst of Fate is it's written from a man's point of view. So
Mm-hmm.
that, to begin with, in the genre is fairly unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it has a different variety of love triangle. So there is a love triangle, but it's a
Hmm.
little different. So you want me to give you the elevator pitch? I can do that.
Yes, please
Okay.
do give us the elevator pitch.
So here it is. A Tryst of Fate is a story about Thomas and Jillian. Thomas is a reporter for the Detroit Free Press. He works the disaster desk. Jillian is an art restorer for the Detroit Institute of Arts. She's an amazing artist. The two of them suffer a tragedy which drives them to divorce. And over the course of the next year, as a way to win Jillian back, Thomas starts writing short stories and mailing them to her. And in each one of these short stories, there is a piece of their history that he weaves into the short story to remind her of their love. Um, Over the course of this year, when he's writing these short stories, sending them back to her, she sketches each story as she reads it. And
Ooh.
through her sketches, she comes to a new vision of their long lasting love affair.
Hmm.
However, um, during this year, Thomas comes to understand that there is a mystery that binds Thomas and Jillian together.
Okay.
And he realizes about 6 months in, he realizes that he can never truly win Jillian's heart back until he solves the mystery first.
Oh.
So
Romance
I,
mystery.
so I like to call
Hmm.
this book a thinking person's romance novel because it is not your stereotypical rip the bodices off. How many times can we fall in the hayloft? It's not that. Um, this romance novel is more about the intellectual and emotional components of a love story rather than the physical parts. In fact,
Hmm.
this book is clean enough that 15-year-olds can read it and have,
Hmm.
and they've told me they've enjoyed it. So it is a what the industry clean terms a clean romance.
Okay.
I like to call it a thinking person's romance because it does deal more with what's going on with these people on a real intellectual and emotional level. So I had a really good time writing it because it does kind of twist and turn a little bit, and the ending is not what anybody expects,
And
which
I
is
have a
also fun
copy
to
that I
play with.
need to get reading.
Well, it's kind of a thick book, so I understand why it's taking you a little while. It's 424 pages, so it can be a little daunting.
Hmm.
But it's not insurmountable. It's not a great challenge read,
Hmm.
but it is a contemplative read. It's a read where you go, okay, maybe I'll sit this down for a day or two and kind of digest it a little bit and then go back.
Hmm.
Um, I like books like that because then you get to really take in who the characters are and what they do. And all of my books are character driven
Hmm.
as opposed to plot driven. So um, I like playing with how people interact,
Okay.
and then I also like playing how the reader interacts with those characters when they're reading the story. So
Mm.
I like doing that breaking the fourth wall kind of thing every once in a while. My satire, Free Will, does
Hmm.
quite a bit of that. It kind of breaks that fourth wall a little bit. So um,
And and that one is a definite different type of book
hmm, yeah,
because tell us about that one.
yeah. So I don't have a copy of it handy, but so Free Will is my satire. The way I pitch it at festivals is it's Saturday Night Live meets the afterlife. Right. So the idea is Rachel dies and she stands before the gates of heaven and hell, and she's told free will is a real thing. She has to spend 7 days in a visitor's pass in each place, and
Mhm.
then in between she has layovers in purgatory.
Hmm.
Um, so she has to test drive heaven and test drive hell. And then when she's done after 14 days, she has to use her free will to make a decision about where she's going to spend eternity. So this came about, this idea for this story, and again, the ending is something people don't expect. But the idea for the story came about while I was being a support person for a friend of mine who was going through chemotherapy. She was also a writer, and we met. She had to do chemotherapy once a week. And
Mm-hmm.
so 8 hours once a week, we sat in the hospital together. And she was a writer, and so we wrote together. And
Mm-hmm.
one day we were having this conversation about um, what would it be like if they actually gave you a choice? Would you like, you die, you're standing before the gates, and they say, okay, so you want to go to heaven or you want to go to hell? When you ask that question, it
Mm-hmm.
immediately conjures the idea, well, if you have a choice, then there must be good things and bad things about both places.
Right.
So my wacky imagination went to what could possibly be bad about, or not necessarily bad, but what could be a challenge about heaven and what could be a challenge about hell that would make people either not want to choose it or be so attractive that you would want to be there. So, one of my favorite characters in that book is Faith.
Mm-hmm.
She is a disenfranchised Catholic nun who chose to live eternity in hell. And she has what she calls a funeral do-over program. She puts the fun back in funeral. Uh, and she offers everybody a casket upgrade plan because
Oh.
in hell you don't sleep in a bed, you sleep in the box.
Ah, I
So
see.
if you
So
didn't get
that's
the
important.
box that your people gave you, you
Yep.
might want to upgrade your box because that's where you're going to be sleeping for eternity. So that kind of gives you an idea of what I did and how I played with things, and I took a satirical look at the traditional Christian church service.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of played with that idea of the mega church and what would that look like in heaven, because you can't have every denomination, right? So you'd have to have it because it's heaven. So you'd have so many people, souls just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to have a mega church. What would mass look like in a mega church in heaven? So I did that, and
Hmm.
so there's a lot of fun little things. And because they're dead, Steve Jobs and Mark Twain both make cameo appearances in the book because they're both dead.
They're both dead. It's safe to use them.
So right, because they can't come back and go libel suit. Yeah, no. And I use them in such a way that I think they would both giggle at it. Um, the other fun thing about that book is in heaven, because it's heaven,
Mm-hmm.
when you spend your 7 days there as a new soul, you get a chaperone, show you the ropes,
Hmm.
right? Show you around, tell you what's acceptable, what's not, what the right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in hell, as one might expect, you don't get a chaperone. You just simply get a guidebook. So, so
Is it just picture instructions with no words?
no, there's actually because words, right? So I wouldn't write a book in pictures. Imagine how you do that. So a couple of my readers came back after reading Free Will and said, "Well, we want to see the guidebook." So on my production calendar for next year is I'm gonna actually publish the guidebook to hell,
Interesting. Something to
because
look forward to.
people have been asking.
And you don't have enough on your
Yeah, and I don't have enough because there's only like 35 major genres on my list, and
right, because your goal is to publish in all 35.
every major genre. So there are 35 major genres. There are like, I don't know, 130,000 subgenres.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say I think they keep adding.
yeah. So I had to like put a limit on it somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, so I chose the 35 majors, And
Okay.
as I'm doing them, I'm checking them off the list. And Drake has been making things difficult because he said, "But I want to write another short story collection." So we have two of those.
So explain to our viewers who Drake is.
Oh, Drake. So, Drake is an invisible mallard duck who has been with me since I was 7 years old. And he sits right here and he helps me write, and he quacks story ideas, and he quacks dialogue, and he tells me what I'm supposed to do and not do with a certain thing. Um, and he helps me write my stories. So the way I interpret a muse
Mm-hmm.
is an imaginary friend that you ascribe your courage to write, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Drake is the embodiment of my courage to write without worrying about critique.
Okay.
Drake gives me permission to take risks and do things that maybe normal people who don't have a muse would shy away from. So now Drake, like I say, has been with me since I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 7, he showed up when I was in first grade as a coping mechanism to write in class. And then
Ah.
and then I was forced to stand up and read in front of the class,
Ooh.
which was a very big challenge for me as a young child because I'm deaf in one ear and I had a pronounced speech impediment when I was a kid. So
Mm.
reading out loud for me was a real big challenge when I was a kid. And so Drake kind of emerged to give me that courage. Let's fast forward now to adult life. I have a 10-year-old son,
Mm-hmm.
and he was one day going to his dad's house for the weekend, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go to the cafe and I'm going to write while you're gone." And he said, "Okay." And he ran to his bedroom, he's 10, okay, runs to his bedroom, he comes back, and he says, "Mom, I'm really concerned that when you go to the cafe and you start talking out loud to Drake, people are going to look at you like you're crazy and they're not going to want to make friends with you. And I'm concerned about your sanity." How he's like, he's like, he said, "I'm not worried about you because I know Drake and I'm not worried about Drake, but other people don't understand Drake the way I understand
Mm-hmm.
Drake." And I said,
Yep.
"Okay." And I said, I'm assuming you have a solution for this problem. And he said, "Yes." And he gave me this.
Which is the absolute cutest little duck.
This is He's a little cute little duck. So he gave me this duck, which I didn't know he had. He had purchased it at one of their like school market days or
Oh
whatever,
yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And he gave it to me and he said, "Now, I want you to take this with you when you go to the cafe to write, put it on your table, and you
Mm-hmm.
talk to him when you're really talking to Drake. And then people won't think you're crazy. They'll just think you're talking to a stuffed animal." And I went, "No, that won't cause any conflict of sanity interpretation in the least. Not at all."
Well, then you're talking to the stuffed animal versus talking to yourself. I'm not.
Right? I mean,
But I
I get the
like the
logic.
logic.
Yeah. Yeah.
His 10-year-old logic is very sound because
Yeah. That's
you're
what I thought.
you're
So
talking to the stuffed animal.
so this is the embodiment of Drake. Now, let's fast forward several years later. I'm a grown up. My son is a grown up. He's off living on his own. He's in his 30s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a writer friend of mine said, "Does Drake have a muse?" And I
Oh,
said, "That's an interesting idea. I should ask Drake if he has a muse." And
yeah.
in the mail, a few days later, I have the best friends. I get this.
It's an itty bitty
It's
duck.
an itty bitty duck that she crocheted.
Oh,
So
so now that's awesome.
so
Drake is in
Drake
business.
has a muse who sits on his shoulder, who sits on my shoulder. Um,
That
in
is awesome.
in case you're wondering, his name is Robert, and he's from Paris.
Oh, Robert.
I I did not make that up. Drake told me his name and told
Okay.
me his country of origin. I didn't make that's all Drake. So anyway, that's the long and short story of Drake. Um, basically, Drake represents the courage to do things on the page that maybe sanity would prevent me from doing. That's the short answer.
Very cool. And we like Drake. He's very
I
adorable.
actually have a few writer friends who speak directly to Drake through me, which is a
Ooh.
very interesting conversation to have. I have a dear friend in Toronto, Ontario, and I've never met her in person. We've only done virtual
Mhm.
festival events. And I think it was maybe the third time we spoke, she started speaking directly to Drake and asking questions. And nobody had ever done that before. And he was answering. And I felt a little bit like a ventriloquist without a dummy. Because they were having a conversation and I wasn't part of it. So, not only are there people out there in the world who understand the concept of a muse,
Mhm.
they also buy into what a muse is and how it works and how a muse functions and why it's important, and they fully support the wacky insanity of my relationship with Drake. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah, you never know what comes in your mail.
Holy moly. I have the best friends, I'm telling you.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing you in person in November in Milford. Will Drake be joining you?
Well, see, Drake is a little shy.
Okay.
He tends to stay home with the dog, and I don't know what they do when I'm gone, and I'm not really sure I want to know. Uh, but he does authorize me to autograph the short story collections on his behalf
Okay.
because he actually wrote those. I just took dictation
Mhm.
because flippers and a keyboard don't really work well together. So he quacked, I typed, and we wrote 2 books together. But he
Awesome.
he has authorized me to autograph them for him.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me. This
Thank
has
you.
been
This was
fun.
really fun. It's been fun to be on the other side of this for a change. Because, I do that virtual book festival wackiness in February every year.
Which is so much fun, and
It's
you always need more people for.
goofy, ridiculous fun. And I've already started writing the story for that. So that's going to be interesting.
Yay.
Um, but being improv, I don't have a lot of control. But
Mhm.
that's part of what makes the festival fun is because it is 100% improvisational. So, um, but yeah, that'll be coming out. Details will be coming out. Actually, I'll have details for that in November. So,
Awesome. So they
anybody
can
who
look
wants
for
to learn
details.
about the wackiness of our February virtual festival, I will have that information on the table in November.
Great. And I will see you then. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.
Have an awesome day.
You too.